Well, good afternoon, boys and girls. We are going to be introducing you all to a new historical figure. His name is Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, many of you may have heard of him before, but we're going to go a little bit more into detail about who he was, why he's important, and all the fun things that he was able to accomplish. Now, first off, let's just say he was the President of the United States longer than any other president. He was known for leading the country through some of its most difficult times, and he actually lost his ability to walk after the age of 39. Now, from an early age, Roosevelt believed in working for the good of others through public service. He was born in Hyde Park, New York in 1882. He was born into a wealthy family and was actually an only child. He grew up on land and loved being outdoors. He had dogs and ponies as pets. When his family vacationed, they traveled in a special train car which belonged to only their family. In the summer times, the Roosevelts would travel to an island in Canada for vacation. Roosevelt attended boarding school until the age of 14. His school offered programs for its students to do outreach work in their local communities. This is where Franklin was introduced to people who had troubles making enough money to survive. He was mature enough to understand that not everyone lived the comfortable lifestyle that he and his family did. In his last year at boarding school, he ran the school summer camp for boys, where parents who did not have enough money to pay for camp or vacation could send their boys so they could spend a little bit of time away from home. He also made it a priority to visit an elderly woman who lived alone. Franklin and a classmate always made sure that she had all of the essentials that she needed in order to survive. Now, Franklin had a hero. His name was Theodore, and Theodore was actually Franklin's cousin. Theodore had become the governor of New York and also the vice president of the United States. Theodore was well known for his high energy levels and enthusiasm. While Franklin was in college, Theodore became the President of the United States of America, soon to be followed by Franklin himself. After college, Franklin went to law school, and while he was in college, he married his wife Eleanor. Together, they believed that it was their personal duties to help others. After being married, Franklin and Eleanor always worked together. Now, in 1910, Franklin ran for New York State Senate. Back then, cars were a new invention and were almost always black. But what was neat about Roosevelt was that he drove a bright red car for his campaigning. He drove at a fast speed of 22 miles an hour. Driving this fast also sometimes even scared the horses that were on the side of the road. Roosevelt was always known for stopping and talking to the people and children along the sidewalks. And it wasn't odd for Roosevelt to make up to 10 public speeches in one day. No one had ever seen someone work so hard on a campaign before Franklin. People felt that Roosevelt would work extremely hard in the Senate too. So the community voted, and he won. In 1921, Franklin unfortunately caught a very serious disease, and this disease affected his ability to walk. Some doctors believe he had polio. At this time, there was no cure for polio. Many people passed away, and those who didn't became disabled. Roosevelt was unable to walk, and he needed help completing his everyday tasks. Roosevelt wondered if he was ever going to be able to continue his career in politics. Eleanor, his wife, always told him to continue what he loved as long as he could. Roosevelt showed diligence, hoping that he would be able to walk again. As he worked on getting himself feeling better, his wife made sure that the public eye did not forget about him or his name. In 1924, Roosevelt visited Warm Springs, Georgia for the first time. Now, Warm Springs, Georgia had warm water, and in these springs were minerals, and these mineral springs were supposed to help heal people who had polio. Now, Roosevelt would go to Warm Springs, Georgia, and he would exercise every day in the Warm Springs water, and his legs actually did become stronger. While he was visiting in Warm Springs, Georgia, he was also able to meet others who had polio. Now, he loved visiting Warm Springs so much that he actually chose to build a house there. After a lot of hard work, Roosevelt was able to learn how to walk a few steps using crutches or leaning onto other people. If he wasn't doing one of these two things, he used a wheelchair to get around. In 1928, Roosevelt ran for governor of New York. Many people wondered if he was capable of running the state because of his inability to walk. One of his supporters said, "As a governor doesn't need to do backflips, he just needs a good brain." Roosevelt pulled through and won the election again. Now, Roosevelt became president in 1933. One of his most famous sayings are, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." The presidents held fireside chats. This is where Franklin would explain how the government planned to help people through the Great Depression. In his fireside chats, he was able to keep America going through this hard time. Roosevelt kept his New Deal. This was his effort to get Americans back into the working world. The government started helping to make programs that would help unemployed people find jobs. Eleanor and Theodore cooperated together while they were young and continued as Theodore ran the United States and helped the country. Eleanor would travel around the U.S. and she would talk to people about what kind of problems they were facing. She was always thinking of new ways to help people. While doing this, she told Franklin D. Roosevelt, her husband, that she had seen and heard from the American people, making her the president's eyes and ears. So many people loved Roosevelt for the help that he brought through the New Deal that he was re-elected by the American people again. He had managed to help people who'd face hard times and keep their hope alive. Few people were able to do this during these hard times. Now, World War II came along. Dictatorship had come into power in Germany and Italy. Great Britain and France went to war against these dictatorships. Soon, other nations started to join into the fighting. Many Americans did not feel that the United States should enter the war. They felt like it wasn't their problem. Roosevelt was then elected for a third time in 1940. He became the first president to be elected 3 times. Roosevelt assured Americans that he did not want to enter the war, but he thought that the United States should help Great Britain fight for democracy in Europe. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Japan was on the side of Germany and Italy. This caused the United States to no longer stay out of the war. The United States entered the war on the side of Great Britain and France. By the time the war was called World War II, it was already 1945 and the war had ended. Nations from every part of the world were involved. Roosevelt told Americans that they must work together. He would ask everyone to cooperate. Both men and women joined the armed forces. Many women took over factory jobs as well. The war changed the way that people lived, how they ate, how they were able to get around, and even their ability to buy shoes. People began to grow their own food on large farmlands. Roosevelt used his radio speeches to explain how the United States would win the war. He constantly reminded the U.S. people that they were fighting for democracy and liberty. He said hard work and cooperation build victory. Now in 1944, Roosevelt won a 4th term as president. He was getting older and very tired, but he did not want to quit until the war was over. Early in 1945, it originally seemed that the war would end soon. The United Nations was created from Roosevelt and other leaders coming together in efforts to prevent future wars. Just before the war ended in Europe, Roosevelt passed away. The Vice President Harry Truman became president, and in August 1945, Japan surrendered. The United States and its allies won the Long War. Roosevelt's leadership helped protect democracy in Europe, Japan, and the United States. Now, Roosevelt has a legacy that is unbelievable. Many people think that Franklin D. Roosevelt was one of our nation's greatest presidents. The programs that he started while he was in office still help people today. Roosevelt is a hero for another reason, too. From the age of 39, he was not able to walk and was wheelchair-bound. But Roosevelt did not let his disabilities prevent him from achieving his goals. The Roosevelt Memorial in Washington, D.C. is the first presidential memorial with no steps, so people with wheelchairs can visit easily. Franklin never gave up. He had the courage and the confidence to lead the country. No matter what the challenge, he made people believe that things would get better. As president during World War II, Roosevelt led the fight for freedom and liberty around the world. He brought cooperation with other leaders and taught others to learn how to find the best in people. He taught other people how to work together when the going got tough. So this is just a little introduction to what we're going to be talking about in our unit about Franklin D. Roosevelt. We're going to be exploring lots of different topics and lots of different subjects, so I hope that you guys learned a little bit more about FDR and enjoyed it. Thanks!